hubris that, destroys the world. And Johnson was of course, whether he knew it or not, committed to helping destroy the world. So an evil man, I think by any metric. So I'm not necessarily surprised. What I am surprised by, however, is the fact that this program, the one you're describing, could have continued for over 60 years at this scale, continental scale, global scale, and no one knows about it or talks about it. I mean, we have a huge government, lots of elected officials. Like, what do they say when you ask them?
This is a bit like the safe and effective narrative, isn't it? Let's all have the entire medical community pretending that injecting toxic heavy metals is safe and effective. And they still pretend to this day that that is the case, when it doesn't take a large intellect or an educated individual to understand that's going to do harm. And yet that narrative still continues to this day. So again, this mass psychosis of denial is mind-numbing, but you can't hide this for much longer. And we do have the climate science community now starting to speak out, starting to state how incredibly catastrophic these programs would be if they were implemented. They're not outright admitting it yet, but they're getting closer. And if you look at historical precedent, when did the U.S. military start its modification in hurricanes? And there's some interesting things going on the hurricane front this year, as in none of them. They're being deflected. And people that pretend that you can't manipulate a weather system of that size, that's absolute nonsense. The science completely disputes that. The U.S. military commenced its hurricane modification operations in 1947 with Project Cirrus. And even the results of that initial small-scale testing appeared to have so much effect on a cyclonic rotation that there were lawsuits pending from that, at which time they began to be more covert about their operations.
And you said you'll notice that there aren't hurricanes in Florida. So the last few years, Florida, the west coast of Florida in particular, just been hammered, absolutely destroyed. Billions, tens of billions of dollars of damage done by hurricanes, no hurricanes this year. And you're saying that that's not an accident. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that we know the technology exists to steer storms of that size. And let me make a comparison. You could have a 10-year-old child divert the course of a 100,000-ton freight train by pulling a lever, literally, and changing the tracks.
That's correct.
And that's the kind of small input, massive output that you can have with these cyclonic rotations when they have the ability to manipulate atmospheric pressure zones. This is undisputed, patented science. So why would we think they're not using these type of operations? We have historical precedent. Project Popeye in Vietnam was so successful at controlling precipitation. This is a historical record that by 1976, they passed the INMOD treaties forbidding weather manipulation for wartime purposes, but not over a country's own population. So if we look at the
Can I ask you to stop? I'm sorry. You're throwing.
Please.
I'm so ignorant on this topic, but I'm suddenly very interested that I just want to make sure we don't miss anything. Operation Popeye, is that what you called it in Vietnam?
Correct.
What?
Correct.
I've never even heard of that. I'm embarrassed to say. What is it? What was it?
Very easily researched historical record. U.S. military was so successful at controlling precipitation over Vietnam that the international community was very concerned about this, at least on the surface. And they passed environmental modification treaties in 1976, international treaties forbidding weather manipulation in wartime. So again, when people claim this is conspiracy, we don't have this kind of power and control, and they try to muddy the climate engineering issue as being the localized, publicized cloud seeding operations. Those are two completely different animals. And we see even some state legislators doing the same. And we're trying to correct that at geoengineering.org because we're working with numerous state legislators now and have been. There's legislation pending in 36 states to ban geoengineering over their skies. Tennessee and Florida have already done so. But we're correcting them and giving them an accurate compass heading that the localized, publicized cloud seeding operations, the kind which they tried to implicate in the Texas floods that killed so many young Americans, as being connected to a localized cloud seeding operation, which is virtually meaningless in comparison to climate engineering. It's an ant compared to an elephant. So intentionally, those that control media and are trying to control the narrative are trying to confuse these two issues. They are completely different. They're trying to mask or hide the elephant in the sky, which is climate engineering operations. So again, these programs are historical record. The Chinese government's so successful at, for example, engineering snowstorms. Tucker, do you remember the blizzard in New Orleans this January? Do you remember that?
No, I don't.
There was a blizzard in New Orleans, first time in recorded history. There was a blizzard in Florida, blizzards on the Gulf Coast. That was January 21st, by the way. That's an interesting date to have that happen. These are demonstrations of what climate engineering can do. And the Chinese government has long since openly stated they were engineering snowstorms with endothermic reacting elements. These are patented elements that can literally transition what should be a liquid precipitation event, a rain event, into snow. And these elements, if people understand they have a first aid kit that sits on their shelf at room temperature for 20 years, you mix the cold pack together, you have ice instantly. That's an endothermic reacting element.
Yes.
That's being split into cloud moisture. And they were so successful in China, they caused billions of dollars of damage to Beijing, at which time they began to be less open about this. Everybody covered it. CNN, Popular Science, The Guardian, everyone. But if you bring that up here, suddenly you're a tinfoil hat wearing nutcase. On that same day, while it was blizzarding in New Orleans, in the polar regions, Alaska, Greenland, Iceland, Siberia, it was above freezing and raining. Do you remember the deep freeze in Texas, Tucker, a few years ago, 5 years ago, something like that?
Yes, very well. Yeah, it shut down a lot of their grid.
Correct. So when it was below zero in Dallas, it was 33 degrees warmer at the North Pole. Think about that. And that's what we're not told. So when you have, let's look at the COP climate conferences. You know what those are? The international climate conferences that we have periodically. Those conferences are not to change business as usual. They are to force countries to actively or passively participate in climate engineering. So at some of those conferences, the Cancun conference, the Copenhagen conference, we had record low temperatures at the time of the conference in spite of above normal temperatures in all surrounding areas. That's a demonstration of what climate engineering can do. So back to the hurricanes. The deflection of hurricanes so far this year, is that a demonstration to other countries as well as to the power that the U.S. military has to manipulate atmospheric pressure zones? And again, these are patented processes. For listeners that have heard of HARP in Alaska, I'm not sure if you ever heard of that, Tucker, HARP.
No.
Okay, that's images of that exist. There's no dispute as to its function or what the patents outline that it can do. Even Discovery Channel did a long episode, which they've seemed to be taken off the air now, called Controlling the Weather. But that's a weapon of mass destruction. They play it off as a benign research facility. That's an ionosphere heater. It transmits 3.6 million watts of power to the electrically charged ionosphere, causing an electrical chain reaction. They're literally using the atmosphere as a physics lab, which we know they do, right, Tucker? You know of Project Starfish Prime and Project Fishbowl, if you've heard of those. Those are the U.S. military's experiments with detonating hydrogen bombs in the magnetosphere, which they thought could collapse the whole atmosphere. Did that stop them? No, it didn't. So installations like HARP are used to control atmospheric pressure zones. Back to the hurricanes, if you can manipulate atmospheric pressure zones with these directional ionosphere heaters, you can literally manipulate their path. And is that what we see going on? Is that a demonstration to others right now? Does the administration want to not have a big hurricane cataclysm since they've gutted all the emergency protection, everything? Do they not want to fight that battle too right now? We don't know. We can speculate on those things. But the fact that there is nothing that we can call natural at this point is indisputable.